3 weeks of football left, and coaching carousel is already in full swing. This week, 2 new coaches were hired, both ex-NFL players. Jerrod Mayo was hired by the New England Patriots, and Antonio Pierce had his interim tag removed from the Las Vegas Raiders, making him their full-time coach. In what is known to be a trendy league, this was not surprising to see, as if you look at the remaining playoff teams, D'Amico Ryans was a linebacker for the Houston Texans, and Dan Campbell played tight end for the Giants, the Cowboys, the Detroit Lions, and the New Orleans Saints. These players had very different careers. Jerrod Mayo was a first-round pick. Antonio Pierce was undrafted. And while Mayo was on injured reserve, both of these players have been on Super Bowl winning teams. Now, what does each one bring to the table? Well, Jerrod Mayo's got some really big shoes to fill. However, he did play for a man who most likely will go down as the greatest football coach ever. With that said, I am curious to see who he's going to surround himself with assistant coaches and his offense coordinator and his defense coordinator, as the man's been the linebacker coach for the Patriots for the last 4 years, but has never actually been a coordinator in the NFL. He might be biting off a little more than he can chew. I would love to know how the interview process went with Robert Kraft and how Robert came to the decision, but I'm not surprised they kept it in-house, especially if he got the nod from Bill. I mean, you would think they would know the person. He played for them for 8 years. They know what his work ethic is like. They know his personality type. And his resume as a player speaks for itself. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler. Not that the Pro Bowl really means much nowadays, but, back 10 years ago it was a little bit more important. He's an All-Pro, Defensive Rookie of the Year. And again, while he wasn't actually active for the Super Bowl, he's a Super Bowl champion, been on the championship team. So, there's that. As much as it pains me to say, I wish him the best of luck, although I will forever hate the New England Patriots. Now, getting to the hiring that I was most excited for, Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce is an alpha male. Antonio Pierce will literally run through a wall for you. Antonio Pierce overcomes obstacles. Antonio Pierce meets adversity head on. Antonio Pierce does not know the word quit. Antonio Pierce was an undrafted linebacker who managed to find himself on the Washington Redskins of all places. Played there for 3 years, got himself a nice contract with the Giants, turned himself into the captain of that team, led that team on defense through the playoffs, beat the undefeated New England Patriots. The man knows how to overcome obstacles. Does not know how to quit. Won't take no for an answer. And if he can't find an answer, he figures out who can. That way he can improve himself and the people around him. This might be one of the few things Mark Davis has got right over the last, decade? The only thing I wish they might have done differently would have been to get a GM in place before they made Antonio Pierce's hire official. Because typically your GM likes to pick his coach because his career is tied to the coach's career. With that said, I mean, how can you not like Antonio Pierce? I don't see how you can't like Antonio Pierce. It shouldn't be that difficult to find somebody to mesh with him. The one thing that I will say is that, as anybody who watched the game this season, he is a fiery guy on the sidelines, and I expect he brings the same passion when he's talking about players and player movement, draft, so on and so forth. I mean, tell me how you could not want to play for this guy. Tenacity is off the charts. Here's his quote after they beat the Giants. The biggest window is the front window. Every fucking door we go into, we're kicking that bitch in from now on. Makes you want to run through a wall. Anything for this guy. He reminds me of Dan Campbell. I don't know if they're going to share the same philosophies on players and such, but you listen to Dan Campbell speak and you want to throw on pads and go kill somebody. Right. You listen to Antonio Pierce speak and it's the same thing. Anybody who's played football, even if you haven't played football, you can feel it building. You can feel the fire building. You can feel the want and the desire to go out and accomplish things. The man, if he doesn't make it as a head coach, should be a motivational speaker. Hands down. Again, I wish him the best of luck. While I am not a giant Raider fan, I don't particularly care for the Raiders, but I do like Antonio Pierce, and I look forward to seeing the hopefully great things that he will be able to accomplish, as long as they're not playing the Jets. Now, on to other coaching news. The Atlanta Falcons are not leaving any stone unturned, as they have now requested permission to talk to Wes Welker about their head coaching position. They have a second interview this weekend with Bill Belichick, but are already setting up a second interview with Jim Harbaugh. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I understand they need to make sure they cover their bases, and you would think that they would have some sort of an idea of where they may stand with good old Bill over there. But if it's me, I might want to wait and see how that interview goes and try not to piss off one of the greatest coaches ever. There has been some chatter about Bill and possibly Kirk Cousins teaming up. If he does go to Atlanta, Atlanta does have a decent amount of cap space to try to make things work. And they do have some good young talent with some seasoned veterans. It might be a good fit for both of them. Although, if I'm a Viking fan, I'm slightly disappointed that Kurt's already talking about leaving. The one job that I imagine is going to be a hard sell this offseason is going to be the Los Angeles Chargers job, as they find themselves in salary cap hell. They are a whopping $44.9 million over the cap right now, and whoever takes over that team, they will probably need to get rid of Khalil Mack, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. So your number one, number two wide receivers, and one of, well, he's no longer a premier edge rusher in the league, but a very, very good pass rusher. Now, they do have a quarterback in place, Justin Herbert. They do have some young tight ends. Austin Eckler's also not going to be on the roster, I wouldn't imagine, considering he was looking for money. They don't really have money, and he's a free agent. They have interviewed Mike Vrabel. They have interviewed Jim Harbaugh. They have interviewed David Shaw. All three big-name coaches. Obviously, Harbaugh's coming off the national championship. David Shaw's claim to fame is really Andrew Luck. And Mike Vrabel had a pretty successful career over in Tennessee as a head coach, and then was unceremoniously fired last week. Getting people through the door shouldn't be a problem. If nothing else, they'll come through the door to interview just to further negotiating power with any other team they may be interviewing with. You know, it's getting them to attach their horse to your wagon with your whole bunch of dead cap space and a lack of a roster once they cut everybody. Maybe Jay Gruden would take the job, though he likes to hang his quarterbacks out to dry and then tear them down on social media after they're both no longer in the league. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it all started during the Philadelphia-Tampa Bay game this past weekend, where Gruden had put out a tweet saying that he was apologizing to any of his quarterbacks he ever coached if they were put in the same position that Philadelphia has put Jalen Hurts. Griffin, who still obviously has some disdain for his former coach, responded to the tweet, essentially calling him out. And the two have been going back and forth on social media for this past week. The worst tweet out of all of them had to be the one that has since been deleted from Gruden, saying that you weren't good enough, Kirk was better, Cleveland didn't want you, Baltimore didn't either, quit blaming me. Now look, I can understand his frustrations. Robert Griffin III is calling him out. You know, he works for ESPN at this point. He's got a little bit of pull with him. I use that term loosely because it's ESPN, but you have to be professional. Like Jay has to be professional. If you have any aspirations of coming back into the league at any point, you can't write that. You can't write that because even though you deleted it once, it's out there. It's out there. People screenshotted it, snipped it. It's never going away. Like all you have to do is Google "you weren't good enough, Jay Gruden," and you'll find it. It's not hard to find. There's no hiding from it, you know. But you hung him out to dry with the media when you were both in Washington, which is one of the reasons why Robert Griffin hates this guy so much. Okay, and then you hung him out in the locker room with the players following the media conference that you had. It's just it's a bad look. Then you factor in the stuff with his brother. Now, granted, John Gruden's not Jay Gruden, but they're related. They are brothers, and you're guilty by association. So I don't know what this man's thinking. I don't know who would ever want to hire him again. With that said, enjoy the divisional round. We got 3 weeks of football left. Hopefully every game is an edge of your seat nail biter. They don't have to be shootouts. They could be defensive. It doesn't really matter as long as it's quality football and the refs don't screw it all up, because you know that hockey game with the Bills and the Chiefs is going to get screwed up somewhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, have a good one.